Hi BookTube, it's Amy, and obviously I'm not very bright because I filmed a Friday Reads video this week informing you that I had read absolutely nothing, which means apparently I completely forgot what I did last Saturday and last Sunday, because last Saturday and last Sunday I spent a great deal of time reading. And I worked my way through a novel that I ended up picking up on Saturday on a whim while I was shopping for volumes of Proust, a novel by Francine Prose that was on the shelf next to Proust called Lovers at the Chameleon Club, Paris 1932, which I picked up and read through immediately. I started reading almost as soon as I left the bookshop just because it interested me so much. And this is a novel that was published in 2014 originally, so it is 4 or 5 years old. But it is something that the premise caught me to the point where it was a cover buy. I picked it up, saw the title, read the back, looked at the cover, and said, alright, I can do this. I'm buying this today. So it is a novel set in, well, it begins in 1932, the event at least, although it's not told chronologically. We see from 1932 onward through the events of World War II, occupied Paris, occupied France, up until almost present day. And it's written in a very interesting way, a way that I think could turn a lot of readers off, and probably has turned them off, if they're not used to or prepared for that kind of writing. It is told in a series of letters and chapter excerpts from various time periods. Some of them are, letters that were written in the 30s and the 40s. Other chapters are, these chapters of published books that were supposedly published, a few decades after the events that the novel is focused on. And so we have a duchess or a countess, who's published a novel recounting her exploits and adventures and actions during the Second World War. And we have the novel told partly through the perspective of the owner of a club, of a photographer, of a writer who claims to be the distant relative of a character who is described in the events of this novel. And it's interesting too because all these accounts, they subtly contradict each other, and so we're seeing the focus of the novel, a woman, a lesbian woman, by the name of Lou. We are seeing her from a distance. She is very much removed from the story. She is the focus, but at no point do we get her own perspective. Do we get someone who is intimately close to her, who knows how things actually were, telling the story to us. Instead, we get people who potentially have a motivation to not tell us the truth, to tell us a story that puts them in the driver's seat, puts them in the hero's seat. And so we never really know the truth. These accounts, they contradict each other. But once you set aside the focus on, understanding the individual perspectives, trying to figure out who it is who's telling you the story, once you set that aside and focus on taking the fragments they give you and creating in your own mind a narrative, then it is a really satisfying and interesting and exciting read. And so I very much enjoyed that aspect of the novel. But essentially what this is a story about Lou Villers. I believe this character is loosely based on a real life woman that the author came across, and she was sort of like an actress to begin with at this club in 1930s Paris. She is an athlete, and she comes to the door of this club. You know, she's hit hard times, and Yvonne, who owns this lesbian club in Paris, takes her in and gives her a job, and eventually she ends up on the stage and in a relationship with an attractive young woman. And then events progress, and she becomes a race car driver because of the way she's dressing. She dresses like a man. She is, you know, she's facing barriers in her career. She is Olympic level. She feels wronged by French society, by French government, and finds herself accepted more or less by Hitler, and ends up colluding with the Germans and providing information that leads to the Germans' success in the invasion of France. And that's not much of a spoiler, because you find that out within the first few pages of the novel, that she colluded with the Germans. And this novel is essentially a number of characters who knew her before her collusion trying to work through the events and discover, you know, what happened and why. But overall, it's just a very exciting and interesting novel because of the settings we get and the interesting and unique characters that show up in this novel. I really love anything that involves, you know, 1930s, 1940s, especially occupied France, occupied Paris. So that was a plus for me, and I just dove right in. I enjoyed this novel, and I recommend you check it out, because it really is an experience to read through.